I'm here with the therapists at the Center for Christian Therapy here in, are you in Salt Lake? Or are you in Sandy?
Cottonwood Heights.
Cottonwood Heights, which I grew up in. I just lived over on Brighton Way. Went to Canyon View in Brighton, so this is my old neck of the woods. And I'm here with Amy, Jennifer, Nancy, Kelly, and Keith. So we talked a little bit before we started about Christian therapy may not be everyone's bag, and you're okay with that. So who are the kind of people you are looking for that you feel you can be the most help for in a situation where you're dealing with a divorce situation or unwed people that are still dealing with some of those family dynamics like child custody or other things like that? And because nowadays Christian carries connotations it may not have carried 20 or 30 years ago, maybe we can also talk about, before we launch into what you're going to discuss or what's near and dear to your hearts, is there anyone that you won't help, anyone you won't see, or people you would suggest may not want to come here because it's not a product or service that you're selling? Would that be fair to ask? Mm-hmm. Okay, so who wants to go first?
Well, I think that most of the people that come here come for either because they've been referred to us by somebody who appreciates the work that we do clinically, and so we have a lot of contacts that send people our way that just like what we do when we work with people in therapy. And then we also have people that are sent from various churches around the valley from different denominations because they're looking for somebody who will value their relationship with God, and we think that that's an important part of healing and also understanding for themselves, and so we'll help them kind of think about just who they are in light of what the Bible says about them. And so those are the people that typically are looking for.
Do you
Christian
see,
therapy.
Is this sort of therapy falling out of favor, or is it growing in popularity?
I don't know, like nationally, but I think that
Yeah, who cares nationally?
we're getting more and more people all the time.
Mm-hmm. And well, I mean, do you know what I'm saying though? Is it kind of, there's a lot of things like the traditional family is falling out of favor,
Sure.
for good or for ill.
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed to say I think it's for nothing but pure ill. Other people say, oh well, different changes and different philosophies, and I just think it's a disaster. So now, if you do not want to elaborate on that, that is fine. If you feel that it would just be nice to have a certain level of detachment, that's just fine. But do you see? I believe that while there may be more and more people becoming less, what would I say, sectarian, I get the feeling that spirituality generally is on the rise. But I'm not a therapist, and I'm certainly not a Christian therapist, so what would you say to that?
I think it's difficult to know. Like you say, I think people are hungry for just answers to really like life's purpose. And so, yes, people are always seeking to understand like who God is and have a spiritual life. But our culture is kind of, in some ways, contrary to, for instance, any like moral right and wrong. And so it's difficult to say. I really don't know what the larger culture is, but I think in our experience, we've got lots of people who care about that. And so that's who we're here for.
Okay.
Well, and I just wanted to share, there have been a couple of times where a couple has come to me after they've been told in therapy that they should get a divorce because they want assurance that if they're fighting for their marriage that I will join them in that fight. And so I don't know if that's been your perspective, but I definitely am pretty open with couples when I first meet them that I'm biased for their marriage. That's going to be sort of where I'm coming from. Now, if they come to me and they've already separated and they want to separate amicably and help their kids in that process, I will help them with that as well. I'm not going to say, no, you're divorced, you can't come see me.
You're not endorsing divorce, but you're saying, but if you're going to do it,
right,
let me help you
do it well, do it as well as possible, help you co-parent well, help you support and listen to the needs of your kiddos as they're going through that hard transition. But I think, I don't know if that separates us because we're Christian, but we certainly value marriage, and I don't think the kind of therapy training we have would ever say you should get a divorce to someone. We kind of let them make their decisions, but I definitely have had clients who've come to me having been offended by that.
Who's familiar with Hosea?
Yeah.
Okay.
We are.
He kept coming back
Yes.
and back and back and back, and she was a hoe. She was, no, sorry.
The Bible's words, not ours.
Yeah, no, she was a prostitute, and she kept doing things that broke the bond, the covenant of her marriage.
I don't know the answer to this question. Does that fly in the face of contemporary therapeutic models? When you're the victim of a serial adulteress or adulterer, just hang in there and forgive. Does that fly in the face of contemporary therapeutic models? I'm just asking. I would guess.
Traditionally,
and it's a guess, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
it does. It flies in the face of it because you're enabling and you're being a victim and you're continuing to. Well, we used to talk about it in the 80s as codependence, right? So,
and for those of you, now you're saying, Hosea, that's even in the Bible? It's like, now people will be actually turning and looking,
look
right?
it up.
Read it.
Okay.
good book.
And a very enlightening section.
Yeah.
Kind of troubling, kind of annoying at first read, because it's so different from what we're taught.
Right, but it's a metaphor for how God takes us back and takes us back and takes us back.
Yeah. Things work out, but you keep reading, it's like, wait a minute. Really, when I was reading through it, I was like, how does this end? Do they get divorced or not? I won't tell you, but you know what I'm saying? All right. So you mentioned before we went on camera that you're clinically rigorous. Why would you want anyone to know that? And feel free to chime in, anyone else. I start with Jennifer because she's in the middle.
Well, we want people to know that because that is a value of ours too, that we understand that people are complex, and we think part of being Christian is also really trying to do things as well as we possibly can in our field, in whatever we're working. So we do a lot of training. For couples, we do emotionally focused therapy. Is what the model that we use is called. And we've done. I'm a certified EFT therapist, and our other couples therapists have all done lots of training in that because we just know that what we do is very difficult at times. We want to be as good as we possibly can.
Difficult for those you consult.
Doing, yeah.
Now is EFT where you ask questions and ask people to describe ideal situations? Is it?
No.
Is it a woman therapist that came up with it, if I remember correctly?
Sue
Sue Johnson.
Yeah.
She's British.
I think I may be thinking of something else.
There's a lot of things that are called EFT that have different. It's a different abbreviation for different things. Like I think there's emotionally functional therapy or something.
Yep,
there's a few different things that have EFT as the.
All right. So are Christian therapists kind of like fake therapists?
No, we all are licensed,
licensed
professionals.
Now, see, some people don't know this.
Okay.
Right, through the Department of Public
Licensing.
Licensing, we've gone through all those hoops, gotten the degrees, gotten the licensing, did the hours.
Some people think Christian therapy kind of winks at clinical rigor. Does it?
No. I think that it gets a little bit confused with what a pastor might do or a person that is like a leader in a church. Churches oftentimes offer lay counseling, which we think is valuable too for what they do. And we're a little bit different in that we are also clinicians. We're Christian, but we do things, we've kind of been exposed and educated on a lot of different models and ways to help people. And so that's our focus.
Why choose the Christian focus in therapy as opposed to just a purely secular one?
I think for those people who are, who that's an important part of their lives, they want their therapist to understand that about them. You know, God is an important part to us of our lives, like hugely important piece.
If I may ask a somewhat personal question of the group, though, would you share why?
Why is that so important?
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have a
Because remember, there are some people watching this that think the whole concept of God is piffle. And then there are others who have just been so disappointed by God, especially when their marriage is falling apart, that there's not much room for that consideration.
Mm-hmm.
So some people might say, well, I kind of like the idea, but not recently, or there's something gnawing at me. And there's a lot of people that become more open-minded as a result of a traumatic experience like a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Would you tell me if you're willing? And if you're not, that's fine too. If you feel that's more appropriate in a different setting, that's fine with me too. Why is God important in one's mental health?
I would say that God is our hope. Like our hope is in our relationship with Him. And so everything else just kind of goes away.
May I ask if I'm on the right wavelength, and if I'm not, feel free to say, that's very nice, but no, you're wrong. That's not what I'm saying. When I like what you said about God as our hope. Is that to say because this world we live in is guaranteed to let us down? Not every time, but you can't. There's no constancy there, right? Is that part of it?
Well, and just in general, like
the only constant is our higher power, God. The only thing that is perfect is God. The only wisdom that functions without fail.
Yes.
Am I on the right track?
Well, and I think it's really important, just from clinical experience and personal experience, we often see a shift in someone that can't be explained by what coping mechanism they're using or how much they've explored a certain relationship. Sometimes there's a degree of healing that comes from God alone. And I think, although we're not biblical counselors, we welcome in therapy, I would say we have a biblical worldview, and I would say that we welcome in therapy exploration of what God might be doing. And
may I ask you a question?
Yeah.
By the way, that was wonderful. Is a biblical counselor someone who basically is saying, I take all my marching orders from what I find in the scriptures?
Now, I can't speak, I haven't had training in biblical counseling, but that's sort of, it's very focused on what the Word says.
Yeah, and I don't say that pejoratively.
No,
I'm just saying, but that's kind of like, all right, well, here's
kind of
your
like lay
question.
counseling, we see it as something useful.
If we can't find it in the Bible, we'll move on to another question.
that's not
in
what
a
therapy
nutshell.
would be like when you come here.
No,
Right.
no.
But you're describing what kind
I'm
of
saying
a
we're
biblical
not-
focus, right?
Right.
Your biblical worldview. Now, worldview.
Oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have brought that up.
No, don't dumb it down.
Okay.
We're not here.
Biblical
we're
worldview, not
catering
necessarily
to
biblical
dummies.
counselors. Yeah.
A worldview meaning simply, I tend to see the world as the Bible describes
God
it.
is at work.
Okay.
God is in control.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
and God can heal when therapy can't, but sometimes He uses therapy for healing. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
And this is Kelly.
I would jump in and say that I think that also starts to address your other question about who wouldn't be a good fit here. And, our clients get to, if people don't want a Christian counselor, that's fine. But we have clients that don't believe in God or who come from different religious traditions, because the foundation of our faith and of our clinical work is a really strong relationship. And this either love or unconditional positive regard for everyone, no matter who they are, wherever they're coming from, and we're here to build a really strong relationship with them and then use our clinical skills and
Soup is soup at the soup kitchen, whether you believe in God or not.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And so people will come to us and feel respected and valued. And
Because of that Christian worldview.
As well as our clinical.
Yeah.
As well as
Oh, yeah.
Because that's also the
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And as others were saying, we as Kelly said, we have people from all walks of life, some who don't believe in God at all, and yet we allow them the space and the ability to explore their relationship with God with someone who feels like, we all feel like we can go in there with them and be with them where they are, even though it may not be where we are with our own belief or relationship with God.
Now, you may not know where this is coming from, but I think you'll appreciate this. It's like, what about people who have in their minds, is this just for church ladies? The Saturday Night Live church lady?
What did she used to say?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe Satan? Yeah. And the reason I ask that question is, are some people, I remember, there's going to be some people that have no hesitancy at all. They're going to say, yes, this is exactly what I want. But there might be some people, it's like, well, I don't want somebody who's going to be terribly judgmental. Mm-hmm. How would you respond to that?
Well, maybe
by the way, I love judgmental. I think there's not enough judgmental, personally. But I want to know, you see what I mean?
I do.
Okay.
And lots of people come to us also because they have been judged and feel judged in other contexts or relationships. And I think the thing that helps people not feel judged but yet also look for truth and be aware of their own truth in themselves is compassion and empathy. Like, people mess up and make bad choices, but through therapy, what I mean by a safe place is that they know that they will be understood and will understand the meaning of their behaviors and will go slow enough and take the time to really understand where they're coming from. And so that's helps them feel respected and understood.
This connects somewhat, Amy, to what you said, is with regard to this judgmental fear. You talked about sometimes people will come, and you're not the only therapists to tell me this. People will say, all right, confirm that my divorce is a good idea. That way my therapist can be blamed in part for why I'm getting a divorce. Now,
sometimes they'll quote us as saying that, even when we didn't.
Yeah.
No.
It's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll say, you know how you told me?
Mm-hmm. So you see so in other words, those judgments can go on either side. It's like, so are you here to help people get divorced? No. You're here to help them make their own analysis. And what about accountability, though? Does a Christian therapist believe in accountability? In other words, okay, you have a problem. Some of this is of your own making. Or is that considered
I think it
wrong?
it goes back to where Kelly was emphasizing the relationship. Like, we're not going to be we're very person-centered, and we're not going to be like, here's the 4 steps you need to take. But I think in the course of a relationship where someone feels they can trust and be safe, there's some challenge that can start to happen that isn't necessarily like directive. It's not saying do this, this, and this, but there is an accountability. I mean, we would hope that people would sort of discover through that accepting relationship that it's safe to kind of go, wow, I screwed up.
If you're wondering why Keith hasn't said anything, it's because he's the farthest away from the mic. So we were kind of hoping that maybe he wouldn't say enough. But I would like to direct this question to you. On the issue of accountability, what about the notion, I mean, do you believe in sin as something compatible with Christian-focused therapy? In other words, some people might come to a therapist and talk about adultery in a way that a Christian therapist might not. But that's just my guess. I'm coming at this as ignorant as the people that are watching this. Could you kind of address that, whether it be adultery, which of course in the setting of a marriage makes perfect sense, or it could be physical abuse of family members, or it could be substance abuse, or it could be pornographic problems, or anything like that. Whatever you want to address.
Yeah. So
but Keith also has to almost yell across the room. So just make sure you speak a little louder.
Okay. So people come in and they talk about what's going wrong. And sometimes they'll say, this is the sin I'm dealing with. Sometimes they'll say, this is the problem. And we'll talk about it as less sin-focused and more this is a problem or an issue that needs to be taken care of. And so either way, we're talking about something that's not working right. And so we try to figure out, why is it not working right? What can we do about it? And how are we going to move on from here, regardless of if we're talking about it as a sin context or just purely problematic in my life.
Let me give you another example. So somebody comes in, let's say I come in and I say, well, I need help because I don't want my family to fall apart. And then in the course of talking to me, I say, yeah, and my wife's really bothered by my pornography use. And I just wish she'd back off. I'm not a pornography addict, and you let's assume for the sake of this conversation, you determine that's true, that I'm not. Okay? It's legal. This is America. I don't want to lose my family, and my wife is just too upset and uptight about it. And so, how would you, like, what kind of perspective would you have on something? I assume that this is not the first time you've heard something like that.
Not at all.
Right. So.
Well, I think in the context of relationships, of course, as marital counselors, we deal with that problem quite a bit, that particular issue.
In that particular frame, I want to
sometimes.
keep my family together and my porn.
Yeah, and most times in some cases there can be some denial that it's a problem.
Agreed. Sometimes
Yeah.
people think I want my porn when I really don't.
Yeah.
I just don't think I can or should. Okay, fine.
But we found that within relationships, whether the person who's doing it thinks it's a problem for them or not, it's going to be a problem in the relationship. So we come at it from that perspective. So if I'm doing marital counseling with a couple, and it's going to present a problem for someone in the relationship.
Is that any different than somebody saying, and she's got to leave me alone with me and my video games?
It could be a similar issue, because if the video games are becoming kind of compulsive or something that the person is using as a way of coping with the struggles that they're having with their wife or husband or in their marriage, then that's taking away their focus really from the relationship.
Let me give you another example. So look, I just don't understand why my wife's so upset about video games. It's just good, clean fun. I also don't understand why she's upset about the pornography. It's just good, dirty fun. Do you see what I'm asking?
I think there is a difference in opinion in our culture about if pornography is acceptable, profitable, even. Some people feel like it's helpful in a relationship. We don't have that
Laura,
perspective.
for example.
Yeah, we don't have that perspective. We see a lot of destruction from it, so we won't affirm that usually. And so,
Does that mean that they should go someplace else if you won't affirm that, or can you still work with people?
I think we can work with people
Would
for
you
a long time.
Would you prefer to work with someone that
If somebody wants us
doesn't
to
share that
say,
view?
yeah, affirm, let me just use pornography and tell me that it's fine, it's not going to affect anybody. We're not going to say that, but we will, most people will find that they'll be respected and understood, and we'll be patient and listen to them and help them work through things themselves. So we're not going to make people feel judged for doing it, but we're also not, in our view, pornography has a pretty negative effect on people.
Well, and our goal is to understand, not to make a judgment about something. And so even though I might disagree with the use of pornography in a marriage, it would be my job to understand where that client is coming from and how it is or isn't working. If obviously it's coming between them and a spouse, then you would want to start thinking about, why are you more attached to your pornography than to your wife? And so you would try to unpack it more.
That's exactly the word I was looking for.
Yes.
You're unpacking it, and whether one is uncomfortable with the idea of whether it's quote unquote sinful or whether it's right or wrong. You're saying it's interfering, whether it's a video game or pornography or sports or whatever various things are.
We want to open the space for discussion. We don't want to do anything that closes the therapeutic space and prevents thinking about things or talking about things. We want clients to be able to bring anything to our office and know that we're going to be really curious about it and interested and care about them, regardless of whether it's a sin or not. We're not interested in labeling in that sense, because that just shuts it down, and we want to open it up, and we are really open to whatever people want to bring.
Another thing when people think about Christians is charity. Do you run a charity here?
No.
So the reason I ask is because a lot of people might be thinking, great, I'll call these folks and they can give me hours of their time in the name of God and in helping keep marriages together. Don't you care about my marriage enough to give me free help?
Well, I'll jump in and say we're not a charity. We do work a little bit with people and help them to get reimbursed from insurance, and sometimes we're able to work a little bit on the fee. But in general, the fee is also a clinical issue. So if people want to pay a certain amount or don't have money, that's always something to think more about. And if people aren't paying for the services, research has shown that they don't value it as much. And so it's really important that they are investing in themselves and thinking about this as an investment and valuing it more by actually putting money into it.
And if we're going to refer to the Bible from time to time, the servant is worthy of his hire.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and I think you stated it very well. That's the best explanation I've ever heard when people kind of defend themselves against the pro bono thing, is that, yeah, hey, there are needs for pro bono out there, but you need to eat too.
Yeah.
And you've worked very hard at this, and this is a job, and this is labor, and
we're really good.
and you
We-
can't.
Yeah, really
Yeah,
good.
It's
and you
a
can't stay in
service.
business. You can't stay in business if you're running.
And
a
I think
charity.
people come to therapy because, well, it's not a friendship, you know, and so
A
I
very
think
good
there's
point.
plenty of service that we all do in our own lives. We think, you know, serving people is very important, but it's not. What we're doing here is therapy as a profession, and people want that. They want it to be professional, and they want it to be about them and not mix in a bunch of agendas, and so they pay for it.
It does help to keep that relationship professional as
Yes,
well.
yes,
And you can't work at the same level of effectiveness when it's
right.
like you say, the pastoral form of things and a more clinical form of things.
Yep.
Okay. So see, I do that as a favor for these folks, because if you're looking for something free, you're probably going to want to look elsewhere. And that's with good reason. It's not because you're cold-hearted or anything like that. Well, thank you. And, you know, because we were talking about that before we started. There's a lot of people that want stuff given away. Hey, I'd like it if somebody gave me a bunch of free stuff too, but it only goes so far. Thank you so much for the time that you've spent.
You're welcome.
Before we sign off, I will provide all the contact information at the end of this video, so you can write it down if you'd like. But would you please tell us the name, the address, your telephone and email, if you have one that you'd like to give out, as well as your website, so that people can look this up if they want to know more.
Sure. So the name of our agency is Center for Christian Therapy, and our website is centerforchristiantherapy.com. We're located in Cottonwood Heights at 2469 East Fort Union, and our phone number is on the website. I imagine that you can put it on the bottom here too.
Which we can do, yeah.
Yeah, and all of our emails are on that website and such. So
Excellent.
we're pretty easy to find and close to the freeway. People come from really all over the state. So
Thank you for being willing to share things on a deeper level than you might get in a brochure. Thanks very much.
you're welcome.